Welcome, everybody. I see some unfamiliar faces in here. That's exciting. I also see people with American basket flowers and other plants clutched in their hands, and that's even more exciting. So let's start. Your speaker you're gonna meet. So please silence your cell phones, would you? Mine just dinged and reminded me. This is same song, second verse. I showed you this slide last month. We do have a new website, nipsotwilco.org. And if you were subscribed to our blog, which is our newsletter on our previous site, and you haven't subscribed on this site, you're probably not getting it. So we do need you to check in there and do that, because I don't think we're reaching as many of you as we were reaching, because you're not subscribed at the new website. You don't want to miss meetings or field trips or plant rescues or anything else we've got going on. Speaking of plant rescues, I want to thank you to all the plant rescue volunteers. We had 18 people May 28th in Leander. How many of you here were there? Nice big heart. Okay. And there's a pickup truck load of plants that went to San Antonio. And then they had Wildflower Center delivery day. And then other plants went to several native plant nurseries and growers and seeds. And some of them went home in your pockets and in your own pots and so forth. So congratulations, and what a wonderful job you're doing. And because of that, we are now up to 200, because you must be a member of the Native Plant Society of Texas to be covered by insurance before our landowners will allow us on there to rescue. We now have 291 members, but most of you that have done that as plant rescue have more than paid for your dues with your free plants. So, and you're doing such a good thing. Thanks. We have a volunteer opportunity. This is posted on the blog this Sunday, June the 11th, to clean up the Williamson County landfill pollinator garden. That is one of our oldest pollinator gardens that the chapter has. And we have details on our website. She said on the blog, she says she needs 5 or 6 volunteers. She needs 10 or 12 or 18 volunteers. I'm telling you, I've seen the pictures. I know what you're up against. It's had plenty of rain, east side of I-35 and all that jazz. Okay. All right. Upcoming field trips. Our field trip committee does an outstanding job with this and other things. There's one Saturday. You can spend your whole weekend doing Native Plant Society of Texas Williamson County projects. There's Liberty Hill, the Tejas Camp, 9 a.m. And Kathy Galloway is our field trip chairman. Do you have anything to add? Details are on the blog.
Yes, it's not very long, so you won't be there till noon. I think it says to noon, but you won't be. The first part is in shade, mostly you're coming back with the sun to your back with lots of wildflowers. So we
gorgeous. Do what?
Level
ground. Okay, all right, an easy one. All right, good deal. Then July, we've got Murphy Park. August 8th is Hidden Springs Plant Survey. This is a future Williamson County park. And for those of you that are new, they rely on us to do plant surveys for their future parks to see what's out there. And so this is the 8th of 12 plant surveys. We do 4 a year. Is that correct? So 3 years worth of turning over rocks and shaking hands with whatever jumps out and whatever, and ticking off what we see. Excellent, excellent opportunity. We've had a recent question come into the to our website about creating wildlife habitat. And if you're interested in that kind of thing, going out on a field trip at a place like that, it's very educational, because you've got people there that know what every leaf and stem is and can tell you probably what eats it or it's involved with it or what part it plays in the life cycle. So hard to beat for an educational experience with native plants. San Antonio Botanical Garden for September 30th, and then the 9th of 12 surveys in October back out at Hidden Springs.
And see, it's 2:30 for you to all this weekend.
Right. We go very early when it's hot, and we go in the afternoon when it's cooler. So,
is that 10 a.m. at the San Antonio? Is that at the garden or is it
at the garden?
At the garden. Early to rise or go camp down there or whatever. Yes. I think we're supposed to get a guided tour. It's a special trip. It's not just a random, we all show up at the gate and go in type deal. there'll be information on the blog for that too. Subscribe to the blog. Right. Something else with the field trip committee, and that's a pretty picture, and you can look at it while I talk about it. We did this week, and it's on the blog. We met with a Eagle Scout candidate in Round Rock. And one of the things our field trip committee does is plant signs. We put signs on trails, most of them on Williamson County parks, that identify specific native plants along the way. And we've offered this opportunity for Boy Scouts. We did have an Eagle Scout that did this on a Lake Creek Trail in it's North Austin, but still Williamson County. So we've had another Boy Scout take us up on that, and he's doing his in the Fern Bluff Mud Brightwater Park, which was beautiful.
It was beautiful.
You know, and there were 4 or 5 of us that went, field trip committee people plus me, and the Boy Scout and his mom and his brother. And boy, we had a really good time, and they did not seem to be put off or dismayed or frightened by our plant enthusiasm at all. They thought we were nice. And so we loved them. And there was a couple little girls selling lemonade,
Yes.
lemonade stand at the end, and Sue bought us all lemonade. It was pretty nice, but I look forward to seeing some more of our signs up. And I'm saying this because you never know. It's one thing you say, I don't know any Boy Scouts. You probably are acquainted with somebody that is affiliated with the troop or affiliated with the regional group of Boy Scouts or something, or Girl Scouts, whatever. And we're willing to finance the signs and the posts. So if they're willing to do the labor. So, and we're telling them where to put it too. Not the labor, the signs. Each identify the plants. This is the plant that you see back there. And I'm sorry, I couldn't find a sign for it to display there, but there you go. It's in flower along roadsides right now all over the county. Big, nice, big powder puff thistle relatives. And I see some of them don't have homes yet back there. So I hope if you want some or you didn't get any, you can pick up more. And then there's some actual flowers that Cindy brought in. So you can see.
There's seed actually in our seed library.
Okay. And there's some other plants back there for free also that Ann Adams, our treasurer, brought. And this was the slide I didn't take out. So I thought they were going to have roots. It turns out it's just the flowers back there. But if you want them, she'd probably let you have the flowers. So, okay. Upcoming program. Next month is our annual meeting when we vote on our officers, and there'll be more about that at the end of this meeting. We decided on a program, the title of the program. It will have to do with plants. It's going to be called Hot Stuff. And you'll just have to come and see what that's about. Okay. We've got native orchids in August, seed savers in September. Ashley Landry, our plant rescue coordinator, is going to speak to us the 12th, and then Bill Carr on academic science versus citizen science. And then Christmas will come, or whatever holiday you celebrate in December, winter solstice, whatever. And we'll have our annual silent auction. Yeah. Is it winter solstice? Yeah. It's not equinox. That's fall and spring, huh? Yeah. Okay. All right. Standard slide. This is where all we are, where you can find us. Our fabulous programs, most of them are available on our YouTube channel. I'm trying to be better about keeping us going on Facebook and Instagram. Changing things. I finally got in there and changed the Facebook picture. So cover. So, always take note of the location of the meeting. We will be here next month, but in July, but in August and September, we will be in the Georgetown Parks and Recreation Community Room. The address will be on the website and the blog and so forth, which is on the other side of the river from San Gabriel Park in Georgetown. So, that's where we'll be. We cannot meet in the library 12 months out of the year, because every once in a while they like to, do a deep clean and inventory and that kind of stuff. Get rid of the dirt that we drag in every week. So Right. Tonight, if you got your blue, did everybody get a blue ticket? I got a blue ticket because I'd like to win this book. Okay. An in-person attendee will win a copy of our speaker's recommended book. This is what he personally recommends. Dirt, the erosion of civilizations. And if you win, please give that information to Erin over here, and she's going to have it sent directly to you from Amazon. Let's see what's next. Oh, next is Jim. He is a retired physician. I said, oh, a doctor physician or a doctor of soul? He said, the real deal. Medical school and everything. So, this is his biography that was on our blog. Seems like a real nice guy. Got a great wife. You know that. We've become thick as thieves already. So, and I can't underestimate the importance of what he's going to talk about tonight. And I apologize for taking this time. Most of y'all know me as a radical plant nerd. But what you don't know about me is that everywhere I've ever moved on the planet, which is either Louisiana or Texas, I went to formerly the Soil Conservation Service, now called the NRCS, and looked up the soil map for that parish or county and studied it closely. Because if you want to find the cool plants, you got to find the cool different soils. So, and if you really want to know about how to grow plants where you're living, you got to get to know the soil that you're living on. So that's why I think it's really important. Hope I didn't steal part of your program. Okay. Welcome, Jim Williams. Here he is.
Well, while I'm setting up, June and I have been gardening for most of our lives. And about a year after I retired, we decided to go to the Master Gardener classes, and we have been doing that. We manage the demonstration gardens out at the Williamson County Demonstration Gardens, which are open to the public. You can come out there anytime. We have vegetable demonstration gardens, herb gardens, tolerant native plant gardens. So you're welcome to come out 24/7. Take a look. Let's see what's going on. When it comes to soil, it is amazing what is down there, and we being, soil science is discovering amazing things, and we're going to go through some of this all the time. It's not what it was. Soil is not what it was, or at least our knowledge of soil is not what it was 5 years ago. It has changed radically, and it's continuing to change. And so hopefully that's what we'll be talking about today. Where does soil come from? Where did it originate? I got a good slide for that. Where did it come from in the first place? Stars. Everything came from stars. But soil does not come from just any star. Soil comes from exploding stars. Giant exploding stars. And so, super nerd alert here. So if you look at the gold, massive exploding stars, we're talking about 50, 100 times the size of our sun, which implode upon themselves in a matter of seconds, which create forces that are just beyond our imagination. And in those forces and that pressure is the only thing that allows everything in gold to form. So only in those massive supernovas do we get the elements that make up our soil. And so it explodes, everything goes out, we get these massive nebulae that are, light years wide. We have star forming regions. Then one star will form and you get an accretion disk of molecules around it. And then that sort of begins to form rings, and you get protoplanets, and finally you get an Earth. And so this is the Earth about 4 billion years ago. Didn't know they had cameras back then. But who took the picture? There's a lot of people on the internet think they know. But 4 billion years later, we get this. And what is the difference between that and this? 5 to 50 miles of dirt. The Earth's crust. So we have the Earth's crust, which is, well, 5 to 25 miles, it says here. And everything else inside is basically the old planet. It's hot. It's, moving. It's molten. And so we're separated from this just by a few miles of dirt. Now, the main thing is that's about 1% of all of the Earth is the crust. But if we look at our plants that are growing in this crust, and we look at everything that's living in this crust, we're talking about the first few inches. So everything that is living, pretty much living on this earth, is living in the first few inches of soil. It is the extremely thin, tiny, tiny membrane of soil on the surface of this planet that keeps everything alive. That's it. You can say the same thing for the oceans, because actually it's the tiny microorganisms, the plankton, that is in the first few feet of the ocean that sustains the entire ocean. And so it's the same thing with our soil. So, question. So here's a picture of the Great Plains with the bison. Here's a picture of Hawaii, the island of Hawaii. Been around for a long time. Had things growing on it for a long time. Grasses, beautiful plants. Where did the nitrate come in? Where did the fertilizer? Who's fertilizing this stuff? I mean, fertilizer didn't take off until after World War II, because we built all these nitrogen. It takes a lot of energy to create nitrogen, and we needed nitrogen for bombs. And so we had all these nitrogen factories that developed during World War II. And so once the war was over with, what do we do with it? Make fertilizer. But before the wars, not a lot of fertilizer out there, at least not mass produced. So who fed these things? Where did they get their nitrogen from? For hundreds of millions of years, where did the nitrogen come from? Who was fertilizing things? And we have found the answer. Elves. There is an entire elven economy under our feet. They build houses. There are actual plumbing and water purification systems, ventilation systems. They mine rocks for minerals, which they give to the plants. They manufacture every plant nutrient. They have nitrogen factories, sanitation, garbage removal, communication systems, defensive militias, all underground. There's only one lie on this slide, and that's the elf, because it's actually the microbiology. There is more living things per mass in the ground than on top of the ground. So when we talk about a living planet, most of the living planet is in the first few inches of the soil. The rest of us live on that palette of soil. And we will go into some of these things. And so when I talk about microorganisms, what are we talking about? Well, bacteria. That's the mainstay. Everything lives off that. If there wasn't any bacteria, very little of this would exist. But we have bacteria, we have archaea. We're going to talk about each of these a little bit. Actinomyces, fungi, which have been around forever, algae, slime molds. And of course, on top of these microbes, small organisms, and then plants and animals. What's soil made of? Structurally, you've got three things: sand, silt, and clay. And it's all comes from rock. And so where did the Earth's crust come from? Well, all that molten stuff got weathered and cooled and eventually broke down into sand, silt, and clay. And also microbes do this too. There are microbes that feed on minerals. But when we look at the sizes, sand is huge. Silt, small. Clay, tiny, microscopic. So you can kind of think of sand like a big beach ball, silt like a ping pong ball, clay like a little microscopic sticky penny. Another big coarse sand, medium sand, fine sand, silt, clay, little bitty dot. So you can have a whole lot of clay, but it, isn't displaced by that much sand. Now let's look at, we're not going to go into this in great detail, but there's what's loam. We always hear garden loam, and it's hard to find a definition for loam, but actually it's pretty simple. It is just the combination of the sand, silt, and clay. So each of those is going to add up to 100%. So on this side, on the left side, we see percent clay. So if we're up at the top to 100%, we got all clay. On the left side, we have the percent silt. And way down here at the bottom right, we have all silt. And same thing, bottom left, all sand. But rarely do we find an area where it's pure clay, pure sand, or pure silt. It's always, it's always a combination of them. And so that's what we're going for, is this combination. Now, here's the key. Whatever combination you have is what you're stuck with. Unless you got a raised bed garden, then you can pick whatever you want. But as far as what, if whatever we're growing has to grow in what we have in the ground. There used to be a thought that, well, if you got too much clay, you can put a whole bunch of sand in there and that will loosen it up. That just messes everything up. Because basically, let's say you did that for your 1 acre property and you put down a lot of sand. And so you're going to improve that. But guess what? A few feet down, you can't do that. You still got a lot of clay. On the sides of your property, you still got a lot of clay. You're going to have this little island there that doesn't interact with its environment anymore. And it really messes it up. So basically, what we have is what we got. And you just got to grow stuff that wants to grow there. We can't change that up. So basically here in Williamson County, to the west, we have the Edwards Plateau. To the east, we have the Blackland Prairie. The Edwards Plateau is a rocky clay. A lot of people think it's sandy. There's not that much sand out there. What you think is sand is actually tiny limestone particles. But it's a clay soil, rocky clay soil. Whereas on the Blackland Prairie, on the east side, we have the black clay, which is actually, if it is worked properly and has enough organic matter put into it, is probably the most fertile soil in Texas. So it's really a wonderful stuff once you get it working. But that's what we have here in Williamson County. Now, the properties that we look for in the soil when we're talking about these three elements, the sand, silt, and clay, is does it hold water and how much water moves through it. And so if we have large sand particles, and then we have the smaller silt particles, and then we have the tiny clay particles, water is going to move through this pretty fast. I mean, it's sort of like if we put a bunch of beach balls, fill this room with beach balls and take a fire hose and put water in the top, it's going to run through pretty fast. If we fill this with a bunch of sticky pennies, billions and billions and billions of sticky pennies, and pour water on the top, it's just going to run off the top of the building. It's not going to soak through. And so When we have more clay, it takes longer for it to go through, but it's going to hold on to it a lot better. And so when we're talking about water and soil, we have water movement, hydraulic conductivity, but how water moves through the soil. And like we say, if we got a lot of sand, it moves through fast. If it got a lot of clay, it moves through slow. And we have what's called field capacity or water holding capacity. So if we have small particles, it's going to hold on to that water. If we have large particles, such as sand, it's not going to hold on to that water. So again, the more diversity we have, the better. We want the Goldilocks. We want it, not too sandy, not too clay. We would hopefully have something toward the middle. But as I said, you're stuck with what you got. So more on that. Air. We need air in the soil. A lot of people don't think about air. Well, soil needs to breathe. Roots of plants need to breathe. I mean, plants, every cell of the plant needs oxygen in order to function. And there's no bloodstream and hemoglobin taking oxygen throughout the plant. So the plants have millions and billions of tiny microscopic holes in their leaves, in their stems, in their trunks, in their bark, in their roots that bring the oxygen into the cells. And so if we don't have air in the soil, the roots die. I mean, that's why you got a place in your yard where your dogs run and there's no grass growing there, and people think, well, they tear the grass up with their paws running on it. No, they're compacting the soil. And when they compact the soil, you don't have air in the soil and nothing grows. So that's basically the living organisms that we talked about. We're going to talk about more. Need oxygen, roots need oxygen. Nitrogen. The air is 78% nitrogen. So if we want bacteria and plants to convert nitrogen for our plants, we need it in the soil. And waste gases. There's a lot of organisms down there. Gets a little stinky. So the ideal soil composition is 45% loam, 5% organic matter, 25% water, 25% air. And that air is 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and other gases. And so we need the nitrogen in there. We need the oxygen in there. 5% organic matter, that seems like not much. And you will find that that is a pretty stable figure, unless it happens to be in your garden and you're constantly putting compost in. And that figure will increase. Because as we're going to talk in the next few slides, organic matter is decomposed by all the microorganisms in the soil. So when you put a bunch of organic matter in the soil, the microorganisms are going to eat it. And as they eat it, the amount goes down. So it's always going to sort of stay at 5%. If you don't put much organic matter in the soil, you won't have that many microbes, and it'll kind of stay at 5%. So you add more, then you're going to get more microbes. They're going to eat it up, and it's still going to stay at 5%. So 5% is, you'll always run across that and wonder why that's so small. But it's because the loam, the silt, stand, and clay, that doesn't change. But the amount of organic matter is always in flux. And when we talk about organic matter, it's the fuel of the microbial community. That's how they get carbon. They're going to live off of that organic matter. What is it? It's the waste and the residues and the metabolites from the ecosystem. It adds nutrients to the soil. It improves the structure of the silt, sand, and clay. And it always kind of pushes it to the Goldilocks standard. So if your soil is too heavy, the compost is going to make it lighter. If your soil is too light, it's going to make it a little bit heavier. If water runs through it too fast, it's going to slow it down and give you better water holding capacity. So it's always going to kind of push it to the center. So how does organic matter decompose? Well, where does it come from? I mean, you can think of, annual grasses grow, annual grasses die. Okay, dead grass is organic matter. Their dead roots are organic matter. Animals die. They become organic matter. Animals pee and poop. That becomes organic matter. All kinds of stuff is blown in. Just, leave your car out of the garage for a few nights and look what your car looks like. Well, that's being blown into our yard all the time. So there's lots of organic matter that comes in. And certainly if you're in a woodland area, you see a lot of organic matter. So we can kind of think of it as large bits get broken down into small bits, get broken down into tiny bits. And this is all done by mostly insects, field bugs, slugs, millipedes, beetles, springtails, worms, fungi. Fungi are one of our most efficient decomposers, particularly of wood. And so if you don't have fungi, the woods and the sticks will keep piling up. I mean, without fungi, the world would be uninhabitable because there will be tree limbs everywhere from hundreds of years that don't go anywhere because the fungi are necessary for the decomposition. Then it keeps on going. We get to huge complex, the tiny bits turn into huge complex molecules, which turn into large complex. Huge complex molecules, big proteins, big complex fats, carbohydrates, all this sort of stuff. And they, with the bacteria, the protozoan, the actinomyces, all these tiny microbes and fungi again, keep breaking them down until you get to tiny simple molecules such as amino acids and fatty acids and just, simple sugars. Now, those aren't necessarily just laying around in the soil. They're actually contained within the bodies of all these microorganisms. When the microorganisms die, they release it. When they eat each other, they release it. So, it's always cycling through the microbial community, but it's all down there. This process, by the way, takes 5 years. When you put down compost, 5 years for it to get down to the tiny, simple molecules. So that's why you always keep adding compost. I mean, a lot is decomposed within the first year, but it just kind of keeps going. So if let's say you put compost down in your yard and you put it down, well, this time next year, there's still going to be quite a bit of that compost down there. You don't see it anymore, but you put on another ½ inch of compost. And so if you do a ½ inch of compost every year, within 5 years, you're in a steady state of decomposition from large bits all the way to tiny simple molecules going on in your yard, our garden. And again, it's all these that are doing it. One thing I want to kind of throw out there is how we think about the soil. Now, we all know about native plants. They're native to our area because they're obviously adaptable to our climate and our moisture levels and all that kind of stuff in soils. And then we have native soils, which we talked about for Williamson County. We got the Edwards Plateau to the east and the Blackland Prairie or other way around, Blackland Prairie to the east. And if you look, there's plants that only grow over in the Blackline prairies and other plants that only grow over in the Edwards Plateau, thank you. And then there are some that grow in both. So, that's kind of the way it works. But they each have their own native organic matter, because as the ones that grow in the Edwards Plateau die, they will become organic matter over there. The ones in the Blackline Prairie die, they will become organic matter there. So we got two different compositions or types of organic matter growing in either one, which means the microbes are going to be unique to both parts. And this is what I saw when I did my, when I was an undergraduate at UT-El in El Paso. My professor was studying soil microbes back then. I didn't know it at the time, but nobody did that. I mean, I wasn't into the research. I was just an undergraduate worker. But we did soil samples all around El Paso and up into New Mexico, and various places. And each place, even though they looked very similar, if you stood there and you looked out, it looked very similar. The microorganisms were quite different in each area, and they were all within about 50 to 25 mile radius. So the microbes are unique. Which were there first? Microbes. Microbes existed before there were land plants. This is the soil food web, popularized by Dr. Elaine Ingram. Her website is soilfoodweb.com, a fantastic place. She is a brilliant woman who really, she was for so many years kind of at the professional conferences, kind of the nutty one. But she turned out to be the one that was right. So she's not the nutty one anymore. She is pretty much the guru of the soil food web. If you want to learn any more about this, that is a fabulous place. She's got classes. You can sit there for hours, and everything she does is pretty much on YouTube, and you can look at all kinds of lectures. Brilliant woman. So this is, highlights much of her work. And so if we go through this, we got the sun. So the sun is going to shine on the plants. We got photosynthesis going on, which for the plants will take water and carbon dioxide and turn it into sugar and oxygen. And of course, they die off and create organic matter, along with all the other stuff that we talked about that gets deposited on the soil. The bacteria eat it, the fungi eat it. Then the nematodes start eating the fungi, and some can eat the roots of the plants, and everything, the protozoa eat the bacteria, everything keeps eating until you get up to larger animals. But one key is if we get back here to the sun and the plants, is where does this energy come from? Well, one photon of light that shines on the plant, actually that energy was created about 100,000 years ago inside the sun. It takes tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years for that energy to make its way to the surface of the sun, where it becomes a photon, which ends up on the plant, which in the chlorophyll of the plant, which then takes that energy and converts it into the sugars. And that is one reaction that has never been duplicated in the laboratory. The reaction of photosynthesis. That is a very unique reaction. And one of the reasons is a very, I don't want to get too nerdy, but it's a very unique quantum mechanical reaction that is very difficult to duplicate. And so it is present in the center of the sun, and it is present in photosynthesis. But anyway, so we're getting all of this sugar produced by the plants. Now, what does the plant do with it? Well, you think, well, it's going to put it into its own growth and put it into its root structure. 25%, on average, 25% of the sugar produced by a plant is exuded from the roots out into the soil to feed the microbes, mostly the bacteria. And that is how they get the bacteria to the plant, is sugar, like cotton candy. Where are the kids going to go at a fair? Cotton candy. And so when they bring those bacteria to them, they bring all those organisms to them, and those bacteria are going to create the nitrogen that feeds the plant. And so not only do they do that, so they're drawing the microbial community to their roots. And the microbial community produces a lot of slime. Remember that cucumber you forgot in the back of your refrigerator and you reached in one time? Pretty nasty. That's lovely in your soil. I mean, they produce slime by when they die. Now, remember these bacteria, the average bacteria lasts about 2 days. That's its life cycle, 2 days. The average bacteria divides itself every 20 minutes. So one bacteria, if you do all the math, one bacteria can become 5 billion over its lifetime. That is a lot of bacteria. And bacteria digest what's around them by exuding digestive juices and then sucking back up the good stuff. And so all those digestive juices produces slime. When these bacteria die, a lot of them are dying, a lot of them are, being born by division, but as they die, more slime. So we get all of this slime, which goes and coats the soil particles of the silt and the sand and the clay. And when they coat these particles begin to interact completely differently. And so you only get that when you have a healthy, vibrant microbial community in your soil. And they aggregate. So, if you have a bowl of popcorn, peanuts, and M&Ms, you can slosh them around, you can reach in there and you can pick out whatever you want. But if you take a really nice syrup and pour it over that and mix it up and let it dry, now you have these aggregates of popcorn and M&Ms and peanuts. And you pick up an aggregate of it and eat the aggregate. Well, that's the same thing that's going on here. Is instead of just having this loose sand and silt and clay, now you have these aggregates of sand and silt and clay. And mycorrhizal fungi, which we'll talk about a little bit, produces what's called glomalin, which is a super slime, which also helps bind it all together. And so here's the microbial slime dripping down, going and coating all the particles. And we get these soil aggregates. These aggregates become the microhabitats of all the microorganisms. I mean, there's spaces in there. There's spaces for air. There's spaces for water. There's spaces for nutrients. And so that's where they live. The fungal hyphae go through and aggregate it. They act like almost a rebar in the soil, holding it together. Insects and animals, particularly earthworms, penetrate it and start all these pathways. And so the amount of air begins to go deeper and deeper into the soil. So you get the aggregates begin to go quite deep. You plant a plant in something like this. The roots don't have to work. They have millions of choices of little pathways to make their way through the aggregates. And so they take root in no time. Over seasons and years, the aggregates begin to go deeper and wider. Out at our demo garden, we do a no-till process out there in the demo garden. Our aggregate layer is about 1 inch under the soil. And we have dug down about 1.5 feet in its aggregate all the way down. We don't know how far it goes down. But we have this just massive amount of aggregate soil, and we don't have to do much with it except keep putting compost on the top. And so it provides a stable environment in our garden for long term, or a stable environment in nature. Out in the Edwards Plateau, we have many aggregates? Probably not. There's not a lot of organic matter going into all that. But you go into the forest in East Texas, you're going to have very, very deep aggregate layers. And of course, that's why forests grow so well where they do. And so it works real good as long as we don't mess it up. We have to leave it there. Now, we talked about, so we've got a root. So we got a root going in that, going through the aggregate layer. And this root is putting out sugars. And those sugars are attracting this bacteria. And the bacteria then attract, this is an amoeba, protozoa that come in and eat the bacteria. And nematodes that also eat the bacteria, and fungi. And so all these sugars are bringing all this to right next to the root, to what we call the rhizosphere, right next to the root. Bacteria. So this is the bottom of the pyramid. 500,000 on a period. So if you take your pen, make a period, you can put 500,000 bacteria on that period. So there is a lot. They're reproduced by division. Like we said, one bacteria can become 5 billion in 12 hours. And the more that are crowded around that root, so the more sugar that plant is putting into the soil, the more bacteria are going to crowd around that root, beneficial bacteria, and they are going to crowd out the pathogenic bacteria. There's a lot of pathogenic bacteria and fungi that can cause wilts and all kinds of other problems for plants. But so the more of the beneficial ones, the less disease. Oops. You're doing the wrong thing. There we go. Secrete digestive enzymes around them. But that's, where they do their thing. Also, that's where they fix nitrogen. So nitrogen must be in the form of nitrate for plants to use it. Plants just can't use atmospheric nitrogen. Atmospheric nitrogen has 3 bonds. It's very, very strong. Takes a lot of energy to break those 3 bonds. That's why it takes so much energy to make synthetic fertilizer, because you got to break those nitrogen bonds. And so these plants, legumes, clovers, rye, maize, corn, rye, sugarcane, some trees, can do that. So these nitrogen, or these bacteria in the soil, as long as they have a lot of air, which is 78% nitrogen, they can convert that nitrogen into nitrate and feed it to the plants. So the plants give them sugar, the bacteria give the plants the nitrates. There we go. Legumes. So a legume, like a bean, is going to sprout and send its root out into the soil. And once it gets out of the soil, it's going to send out a flavonoid chemical into the soil. Now, a rhizobium, which is a nitrogen-fixing bacteria, is going to detect that flavonoid. And when it detects that flavonoid, it's going to send back its own chemical response. Yes. It's just a type of aromatic chemical that kind of think like an enzyme sort of thing. The legume is going to detect that response from that rhizobium bacteria and start building a nodule on its root. Once that nodule forms on its root, these nice little white cream color nodules, it will send another signal out to the rhizobium, and the rhizobium know to move in. And when the rhizobium move into the root, they're just sitting there getting fed sugars, and they're converting nitrogen into nitrates. And so that's where we get all the nitrogen for those particular plants. There's also, this is about in the last 5 years, what's called endophytic bacteria. This is really becoming a big deal. Very intelligent woman whose name I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce. From University of Queensland, was the first researcher to document this. These are, and James White and Rutgers picked up on it, so he's doing a lot of research on it, and then other people are picking up on this now. So in a plant cell, sorry I don't have a picture of this, but in a plant cell, you've got a cell wall. That cell wall gives it structure, and so that's why a plant can stand up without bones, because it's got that cellulose structure that cell wall is made out of. And just on the inside of that cell wall is the plant cell membrane. What happens is some of these rhizobium bacteria, another type, but mostly the rhizobium bacteria, actually enter the root of the plant and situate themselves between the cell wall and the cell membrane of the plant. And this is being done millions and millions of times over. I mean, we're talking about millions of bacteria in there doing this. Once they get in this area, the plant sends out an oxidative chemical that takes away the cell wall that dissolves the cell wall of the bacterium. So the bacterium doesn't have a cell wall anymore, just this little cell membrane. It's very vulnerable, and other chemicals start coming from the plant, and all the bacteria does is just start pumping out nitrogen. So it's just laying there, again, getting fed sugars, pumping out nitrogen inside the root of the plant. And they'll stay there for a day or so and then move back out into the soil, get their cell wall back, and the cycle just keeps going. And so these are bacteria that actually live inside, transiently live inside the plant and produce nitrogen for the plant. They also produce hormones. There are 5 basic hormones for plants. And the hormones work in combination with each other. A percentage of this hormone, percentage of that hormone does one particular thing. And they've always had a hard time figuring out exactly where in the plant these hormones are being formed. And some of them they do know, some they kind of don't know very well. And what some of these researchers are finding is that some of these endophatic bacteria actually manufacture some of these hormones, or at least help the plant to manufacture the hormones. There are ways in the laboratory that they can get rid of the endophatic bacteria in some of the plants as they're growing, and the plants start to wilt. And then they replenish the endophatic bacteria and the plants perk back up. So we know yes, ma'am.
Do they multiply in?
No, they do. The question is, do they multiply in the plant? No, they don't, because once they kind of get oxidated, they can't do much except what the plant wants them to do. Yes. What I think is really cool is they also move throughout the plant. They can be found in the stems, they can be found in the leaves, they can be found in the seeds. Well, what are they doing in the seeds? Well, when the seed goes out, so a bird eats the seed, the bird goes and he poops the seed. So now you got this little compost that the seed is in, and the seed germinates, and the seed self-inoculates its area with the bacteria that it needs. And so it's a whole cycle. So this endophatic bacteria, this is really cool stuff. So bacteria is pretty important. So where did the nitrogen come from before fertilizer? Bacteria has been feeding our plants the whole time. Archaea, we won't go into some of these little ones very much. Similar to bacteria, but are different. They live in extreme environments. They love extreme environments. Bioremediation. So if there's a toxic spill somewhere or oil spill, you know how they do the bioremediation, put it in there. Most of those are the archaea that just love to eat all that stuff. But they're in healthy garden soils. They're really good decomposers of matter, and they can just live off of minerals. They can live off of sulfur, what's called chemosynthesis as opposed to photosynthesis. Actinomyces, kind of a unique soil microbe, can fix nitrogen. compose chitin and cellulose. The chitin is like animal or insect exoskeletons. So they're the ones that take care of that. Produce a lot of antibiotics. So they are good for defensive purposes in the root zone. The smell of fresh soil, or you go out after rain, you get that unique smell right after rain. That's actinomycetes. That's what produces that smell. Fungi, critical. Fungi have been around forever. Long microscopic hyphae. So these things, if you can see them, this is probably, each strand is probably billions and billions of mycelium. They decompose organic matter, particularly wood. So anything having to do with wood. So forest floors are going to be full of fungi. So the more we have down there, the better. Mycorrhizal fungi is a unique type of fungi. Very common type of fungi, but very unique. It actually associates with the roots of the plants. It penetrates the roots of the plants. Some types of mycorrhizal fungi actually penetrate the cell of the plant cells and the roots. So what they do is they extend into the soil further than the root zone. So if a plant has a root zone of, say it's an annual plant, has a small root zone, maybe 12 inches around the plant, but it associates with mycorrhizal fungi, that fungi may go out 3, 4, 5 feet. And so now you have this huge area where it can get water and nutrients and that sort of thing. So when we talk about drought tolerance, mycorrhizal fungi really are handy. If they've been around forever, the original plants, original land plants were lungworts. Lungworts were the first plant to venture. Even today, lungworts don't have that good a root system. There are, you can look at fossils now, like with under certain type of electron microscopy techniques, and look at plant fossils and actually see at the cellular level, if it's a good fossil. And there is a place in Ireland that has a lot of botanical fossils that they've been studying. And this place in Ireland is dated back 450 million years. And it shows the lungworts with the mycorrhizal fungi penetrating. It's very rudimentary roots. So probably the first land plants being that needed the mycorrhizal fungi in order to function. And probably that early mycorrhizal fungi was part of what helped created the crust of the earth, because something had to break down some of these minerals, and the archaea and mycorrhizal fungi just love to eat minerals. They can interconnect plants. They can bring nutrients to plants. They can bring water to plants. They can help intercommunication. It's a term they call the wood wide web, where tree roots can interconnect through the mycorrhizal network. There's been experiments where they have shown that near a mother tree, so since a tree, drops acorns or whatever and has their little babies coming up, that they can put a tracer, CO2 tracer into the tree, into the mother tree. She takes up the CO2 tracer, turns it into sugar, and it appears in her offspring trees not too much later. So she is supporting her offspring trees through the mycorrhizal network, but not trees of other species, only her offspring trees. Mycorrhizal fungi is good at transporting phosphorus. And if a plant is low in phosphorus, it will shunt the phosphorus to that particular plant. but it also will demand more sugar. And so a little capitalist there. But it's fascinating what goes with it. And also, see what my next slide is, plant defenses. So a plant can, if it is getting attacked by a certain pest, can put certain chemicals into the mycorrhizal network, and it communicates with the other plants that that pest is in the area. And you will see the other plants begin to generate defensive chemicals for that particular plant. Now, how does it work that fast? Kind of strange, isn't it? Remember, transpiration, particularly in large trees, can be up to 100 to 200 gallons a day. That's a lot of water. And if you got a lot of trees on this mycorrhizal network, you're moving a lot of water pretty fast. So it is not a slow, okie dokie kind of transmission of water and nutrients. It's pretty fast because of the way the transpiration, the water flow through the trees and plants works. So that's one thing that's going on. Protozoa. Won't hit this much, but these are little one-celled animals that consume up to 10,000 bacteria a day. Now, the key is bacteria are high in nitrogen. Protozoa don't need that much nitrogen. So as they eat the bacteria, they are basically going to poop out all the nitrogen. In what form is it? It's in nitrate. Now it's available to the plants. So as the bacteria are eaten, more of it is being fed to the plants. Nematodes. You ever had them on your tomato plants? You don't like them, but they're very good in the soil. So they're just microscopic roundworms. Yeah, tiny microscopic, large microscopic, but they help build soil structures. They help build tiny little tunnels all the way through your soil aggregates, particularly your soil aggregates. And these tiny little tunnels hold water. I mean, sort of like if you get your prick your finger, you know, you get a finger stick and somebody pricks your finger and you get a little thing of blood and they put a little glass tube and it goes up the glass tube. That's capillary action. So the tiny microscopic tunnels that these nematodes make are through capillary action going to hold lots of water. So it's and the larger ones help aerate the soil. Also, the bacteria hook, will catch a ride on these things. So if, as they go through the soil, the bacteria will get on them and move about various places in the soil. Arthropods, these just bugs. They just chew up the big pieces, make little pieces. Worms. Nothing better than worms. 600 million years of gardening experience. Whoop, get back. 1 acre of good garden soil contains 2 to 3 million earthworms, processing 20 tons of soil a year. That's a lot of soil moving through there. I mean, if you think of how much you pay for earthworm castings at the nursery, this is having rich, compost-rich, organic matter-rich soil is really the key. So we get into, when it comes to fertilization, we're always geared to fertilizing our plants, giving our plants the proper balance of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium fertilizer. We want to get the trace elements in there. We want to do all this. But for hundreds of millions of years, that has not been necessary. The microbes have done it. And the microbes will continue to do it as long as we feed the microbes. And so if we give the microbes what they need, which is basically organic matter, they will do their thing. So a few gardening notes: keep the microbes and worms handy. Maintain the stability of the root zone of the environment. We don't want to till it up. Now, when we start a new garden bed, yeah, we want to till that up and get good soil in there and get good compost in there and really get off to a good start. But after that initial preparation, we don't want to touch it again. We don't want to work anything more than the top 2 to 3 inches of soil. And so every planting, every season, we just put down our compost and amendments, work it into the first 2 to 3 inches of soil and leave it. And that will work. If you have a perennial garden, once a year, pull all your mulch back. Put in your compost, maybe work it into the top 1 or 2 inches of the soil, put your mulch back, and that'll take care of it. And so we don't want to deep till, we don't want to mess with it below 3 inches. This includes turning it with a shovel. We don't want to dig down and turn it with a shovel. Remember, all these microorganisms, you're going to have one type that's growing in the first 2 or 3 inches of soil, a different type growing in the next few inches of soil. So we got these various soil horizons, and they have different populations of microorganisms depending upon the amount of air and water and the temperature and all that kind of stuff. And so if we get in there and we start turning it and mixing it all up, we just messed up their whole environment, and they've got to start over from scratch. So if we leave them alone and just replenish them with their food, with their organic matter from the surface, then we're good to go. Mulch for temperature and moisture stability. Again, if you got a perennial garden, you have to be careful with the mulch. Some of them don't like a lot of mulch. Some of them don't like, to be wet at all. Russian sage. Who grows Russian sage? Like Russian sage? No, not anybody in here. Okay.
Mealy blue sage?
No, that was not bad. The reason I use Russian sage is that if it rains, you better go get your mulch off of it, or it's going to start turning brown, because it just can't stand.
Blackfoot daisies and Damien.
Yeah, same as blackfoot. Yeah. Aeration for root and microbial respiration, whether it's your yard or any compacted area, aerating it is good. Again, the compost. Eliminate or limit the use of synthetic fertilizer. Synthetic fertilizer is not going to kill your microbes. That doesn't happen. But what it's going to do is then when you put it on your plant, when you feed your plant with a synthetic nitrogen, the plant is getting the nitrate it needs. So it doesn't need to put any more sugar into the soil. It's getting all what it wants. And so if it's not putting sugar in the soil, it's not attracting the beneficial microbes to its roots. And so it opens the doors to pathological bacteria, pathological fungi that might start coming into its root zone and entering the plant. And so when we use too much synthetic fertilizer or routinely use synthetic fertilizer, you do see more disease because of that. Out in our demonstration gardens, depending upon the plant, occasionally we will use a side dress of a supplement, quarter strength, half strength synthetic fertilizer, because it is a particular plant that grows fast. When you're growing annuals, there's no native vegetables anymore. Native vegetables are hundreds and thousands of years ago, and they've all been hybridized since then. So these they're annuals, and they've got to set roots, set leaves, photosynthesize, get flowers, put out their vegetables in a few weeks. They just got to go fast. And so some of them need a little help, some of them don't. Some of them just do wonderful just with organic control. Some need a little help. But again, limiting or eliminating that use is good. Any questions so far? Yes.
What do you do for aeration?
What do we do for aeration? Well, you can, the cheap and easy way is to take a garden fork, put it down as far as you can, push it back and forth a couple of inches, because you don't want to tear up the soil, but you just kind of want to crack it a little bit, minor earthquake kind of stuff. That's the easiest way. You can do core aeration, which you can buy these little core aerators that you just step on and push into your soil and pull a core out. So that'll give you a nice core aeration. In your lawn, you can rent these core aeration machines, which is better to hire somebody that's under 30 to do that. Because
Man killer.
yeah, because it'll exhaust them, so they're tough. So those are the best ways. Let's see what next slide is up. Just found that in our garden a couple of days ago. Like your swallow says. Yeah. That.
Okay, I want to say good night to our virtual attendees. Thank you for joining us tonight.